Welcome to Almost Grown Up. I'm your host, Lucy. So today on the podcast, I wanted to talk about this idea of inspiration as a practice, because I have felt like for a long time, I've been in this really nice wave of inspiration, and it's like things have been like popping off, and I'd see something and something else would lead me to a different thing, and I just felt like this world of inspiration, this net of inspiration of things that I wanted to explore or discover or ideas was just growing larger and larger. And I was like, I guess swinging from rope to rope, that kind of like through the jungle, like tree branch to tree branch idea of moving my way through the world, and inspiration that was really feeding my creative practice, and it felt like great flow. And then all of a sudden, nothing. Like, I just felt a bit like, blah. And I've really struggled. And I have been struggling a little bit with what does it look like to find inspiration when you're just not feeling inspired, right? And you want that creative energy that comes from feeling inspired, from having inspiration. But when it's not there, it can feel like, alongside a kind of writer's block type thing, it's like this inspiration block of everything feels a bit tired, or I feel like I've heard this idea before, or that thing doesn't really inspire me, or just stuck, I guess. A few weeks ago, I was like, oh, is this it? Do I just have to accept that this is kind of how I feel? But I was actually recording the last podcast and talking about wonder as a practice and how important it was not to just wait for wonder to come, but to practice it. And it got me thinking, maybe I should be doing exactly the same thing with my inspiration and curiosity. So it felt like a good idea to look at what a curiosity practice might look like and how that might create some sort of inspiration practice. So I am by no means through this. I am figuring it out, but I am definitely feeling more inspired, I would say. So I wanted to share a couple of the ways that I have been practicing curiosity and inspiration over the last couple of weeks to bring a little bit more of that creative energy back into my practice and into my life. So the first thing I wanted to say was, I realized I'd been relying a lot on my phone, a lot on the same kind of podcasts, and that actually I needed to get away from that for a little bit. I needed to like step away. And so what I decided to do was set myself a couple of like tiny side quests, like mini things that I was going to try and fit into my week or my day to find a little bit of inspiration. And that became really helpful construct for me. And what I've realized, for me at least, is having constructs, like having these little tangible things that I'm doing, make me, one, do them, but two, make me kind of excited about doing them. And so one tiny side quest I had was like follow the route, follow like the lead. So I would listen out for everything that I could, or when I was engaging with something, scan things that I could. And if there was a name, if there was a book recommendation, if there was something, I would capture it down. And hopefully it was something that I had a bit of a reaction to, either positive or negative, because I think that there's something actually in embracing the fact that you have a bit of an allergic reaction to something, and to explore what that is, because that is also creative energy in work, I think. And so I started a note on my phone, a simple note on my phone, and I would just capture what, let me get it. So I say stepping off my phone, but the idea is I would just capture like a few keywords from the thing. So just phrases. Like I heard this phrase, shepherd of attention, and I was like, I love that phrase. That's a beautiful phrase. That's going in my kind of inspiration file. Or from a random YouTube video I was watching about gardening. What makes it cinematic isn't the action, it's the intention. I wrote that down. I was like, okay, this is really fascinating. And then I just have a note, Eileen Miles. Go and read some Eileen Miles. And I that like artists and writers and things like that are all going on that list. So that was a mini side quest that I started, and that has been really helpful. And I think I'm slowly building on that list. And And I don't think I've really dived in too much to any of those things, but just building that backup list of like, these are places that I can go and dig down into has felt like a start of inspiration. The next thing I did was to go to the library. So I think a tiny side quest to go to a new bookshop, a secondhand bookshop, are great to essentially find recommendations for reading that aren't necessarily your picks, but also libraries are free and wonderful resources. And I think the good thing about a library or a used bookshop over perhaps a new bookshop is that their collection is a little bit different because it's not designed just by what is selling right now. It's what maybe has been popular in the past, what books people have asked for, what the library feels are relevant books, or what the secondhand bookshop has had donated to it. And I like that because there's also an element of discovery. There's an element of adventure of going through what might be there rather than being presented with a shelf with a display of 20 of the same book that's the bestseller this year. So getting out and going for a little explore in libraries and used bookshops, I think is great. And even if you're not a reader of fiction or poetry, or I don't know, whatever it is, maybe you want to look at the design books, maybe you want to look at the kids books, maybe you want to go and look at the biographies, maybe you want to look at the transport books or the travel books or whatever there is. Like my used bookshop and my library actually have magazines as well. And they're really useful to pick up. One, for collaging, because that is just a great resource, but two, just to flick through and look at that moment in time and think about what articles felt relevant for that moment, or what were people discussing in 2021. You know, that use of a moment in time can be really inspiring. And so I really recommend that as a tiny side quest. Another tiny side quest I started was to delve into things that I know I already love. So whilst the like listening out for things practice and the library practice were all about perhaps discovering newness or thinking about things that I wouldn't naturally veer towards, the practice of following things that I love and re-listening and re-watching has been really nice, because I think what it does is it kind of reminds you of the things that give you joy. One, gives you a big creative boost anyway. And I think when you go back around on things that you love, they're always slightly different from when you last engaged with them or from how you remember them. And one, it's really interesting to see, like, do they stand the test of time? Do you still love that film? Do you still love reading that book? Do you still love listening to that album or that song? And just re-engaging with it to see if it's kind of as fantastic as it felt in your kind of like, I love these things file. But also, if it is fantastic, one, I personally got a real boost of creative energy. But two, I think that what it offers you is a chance to be like, oh, okay, this thing I really love. And then maybe from that, you can take a thread and go off and try and find more things like that thing. Or things that might have something in common, like it's that thing adjacent. So let's say, like, I realize like a lot of the stuff I love is kind of slightly absurd. So, but I've never really thought necessarily to look into absurdism and absurdist art or absurdist writing as a particularly like area of study or an area of exploration. But then that's a term that I can go off and open so many doors, right? I can get curious about what that looks like. I think what it also does is just remind us that we do love things. Like, there is like passion and excitement and energy, and just having a shot of that energy can be a really useful way to feel like you can start something new, or you can go off and make something in response to the thing that you've just processed, or think about what your version of that thing might look like. So I think that's a great side quest starting point for a lot of inspiration. So then another side quest that I think is worth trying, and something that I have been trying, is taking pauses and just sitting for a bit and allowing whatever to come, like basically boredom, I guess. And I've tried to find a deliberate space to practice this, like maybe going out and sitting in a cafe and watching the world go by. That's something I tend to find particularly interesting or inspiring. But so often now I would go to a cafe with a notebook or with my laptop or with something to do versus the nothing to do, just sit and have the cup of tea and watch the world while you do it. And I think having those little breaks allow and create space. And I was looking up because I remember hearing on a podcast, I think it was the Creative Pep Talk podcast, which if you haven't listened to, I 100% recommend. And this was like a good couple of years ago. But the host, Andy, was talking about the etymology of the word inspiration and the idea that it comes from the Latin word respire, I think. So the idea of to breathe. And the inspiration part is to breathe into. So it's like inspiration basically translates to breathe into. And I realize in order to breathe, we need the space either side of the breath, right? We need that pause, we need that moment to drop. And that's where the breath comes from. That's where the inspiration comes from, right? Is not being so overwhelmed, not having so much going on. And I look at maybe why I have been in a practice of like really swinging from thing to thing and then all of a sudden just falling flat, was because perhaps my plate of things that I was trying to do was piling too high and my tolerance level for it faded to the point where it was like, actually, no, I just feel overwhelmed all the time rather than excited by what there could be. Because why would we inspire? Why would we breathe in more when we're already full? And so I think having a practice or a mini side quest of just breathe out, take a breath, take a space, pause, and then see what happens, and trust that something will come to you, I think is quite a useful side quest to explore. So if you are feeling really stuck and really uninspired, ironically, I would say instead of going out and searching for more inspiration, maybe one of the most helpful practices we can try is just to pause, is just to breathe, and sit and watch the world go by and create space for the new inspiration to come in rather than adding to what potentially could be overwhelm or burnout, or just having reached, maybe you've just finished a creative project and of course like you've put a load of creative energy. It's maybe not the time to feel necessarily inspired by the next thing. Maybe you need just the rest. So that is a side quest that I would 100% recommend. And the other side quest that I tried was to try something new, to try a new creative practice hobby idea. And I was actually really inspired by my friend and friend of the podcast, Annie Yee, who just shared a couple of weeks ago on her Instagram about doing paintings of plant shadows, like of the leaf shadows. And she held a class for it. She's amazing. You should go and check her out if you don't know who she is. If you've not listened to the podcast, you can listen to a couple of episodes that we've done together on wonder and the practice of wonder. And I am pretty sure leaf shadow painting falls somewhere in wonder practice. But also I think it is a great practice for me. It was something that I'd never done before. And I was like, this is a wonderful idea. I'm going to go and try it. And I just sat in a cafe and painted the shadows of the leaves, and just in doing that I felt like, oh, all of a sudden lots of different questions came up for me and it sparked this curiosity, and I think when I'm feeling curious I'm feeling inspired. So that felt like a side quest that started something new, and I think whatever practice you want it to be, but maybe trying something that you've not tried before that is gentle, that is a kind of dip your toe in type thing, can remind you of that momentum of being inspired, of new potential ideas, but also give you that satisfaction of like, it doesn't matter what you do or how you do it or how well you do it. You've just made something that didn't exist 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, an hour ago, whatever it is. You've just done something that wasn't there before. And whatever that is, that is a really worthy thing to have done. That is something that you can be like, yay, well done me, pat on the back. And I think just the start of reminding ourselves that we can have this creative energy and flow. And the final thing I think that I've had as a kind of tiny side quest is to follow the questions. And I know I was saying I started a note of capturing down names of people and ideas of things and phrases that I liked. But right now, my child, and I guess I'm kind of lucky in this because he's asking a lot of questions. We are in a phase of like, how does this work? How does that work? How does the sea work, mummy? And that level of curiosity has been super inspiring because it's made me be like, I do not know the answer to that. And having these tiny curiosity side quests, and maybe it just starts with a question. And if you don't have a toddler around you a lot of the time, maybe you need to kind of come up with other ways of making questions. And one of my favorite ways to do that is to just like look around you. So we'll do the exercise now is you just sit and pause and look around you and try and think up a question for something that you can see in front of you. So for example, right now I'm sitting by my desk. And a question could be like, I wonder which tree this wood came from and in which forest, and how they cut it and how they prepared it and how it got transported from where it went to my house. Like that journey of the piece of wood there are multiple questions in that. Or like, how does my camera actually work with this lenses? Like, what is this reflective process that is going on so that I can understand that well enough to be able to explain it to a 2-year-old, which is a whole different thing, or like, who made this, who designed it, where did we come up with camera design from, like how has that changed over time, like is that something that is going to get radically better, do we think, is that something that's kind of going to stay as it is? Like there are all of these questions that we can ask. Or like, why is the wind blowing that way? Does the wind always blow that way? Like, is that the design of this building? Like, how has the air come in like that? Or I wonder who decided that the color orange was going to be called orange. Like, and did we name the fruit first or did we name the color first? And they're all really silly questions, but the point is that by starting to practice that curiosity, we open space for inspiration to come, because we might not like any of those questions, but we might find a question that actually really interests us. And I think when we start to go into those things with interest and curiosity, we find out something that just gives us that brush in, that just gives that fill of energy to then go out and express, to then go out and explore, to then go out and make. So those are some tiny side quests. They have been really helping me, and I feel, to be honest, right now, like I have some inspiration flowing. Do I have as much as I would want to? Maybe no, but I've also recognized that right now I'm a bit tired and a bit overwhelmed. So what I was saying before about creating space, like I don't know how much space I have for lots of fresh inspiration all of the time. And if you feel like that as well, let me know. I think it's really interesting to explore this space between feeling fully inspired all the time and managing creative energy, creative output in busy schedules, in busy lives, in lots of spinning plates that we need to manage. But I'm convinced that finding practices is probably the best way for me, at least right now, to keep inspiration coming in, to keep creative work flowing out, and to just be in that rhythm with myself where it doesn't always have to be everything, but there's always a little something that is flowing through, just to keep that stream alive and going. So I would love to hear from you what your experience is and how you keep that inspiration tap turned on. I will be back in the blanket fort soon, hopefully with some fresh inspiration on a topic that we've said we're going to talk about. I'm not sure what that's going to be yet, if I'm really honest right now. I also think that there'll probably be a little bit of a break in the podcast over July and August. Hopefully we'll get one more out before the holidays. But I am doing a lot of traveling, and I also want to honor that season that I'm in. So there might be a bit of a pause, but I will definitely be back in September. And yeah, let's keep chatting and figuring it out as we go. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching. I can't wait to hear how you find inspiration and what that looks like. And yeah, let's keep figuring it out. I will be back to speak to you soon. But in the meantime, happy growing. Let's do it. We're always playing with my hair, aren't we? That's how we start all of these. But that's okay. So that's what we're doing here. I am tired.